Well, as a lot of our members here at Sojourn are aware of, through the years, God has really demonstrated how His kingdom is all about relationships. And as we slow down and think about that, we realize the type of men and women He allows us as a community to have alliance with. I think alliance is probably a lot better word than association. It's an alliance of the heart. One of those ministries and one of those people is the president and founder of Liberty Institute. In fact, I was looking at the lyrics of the songs that each one of us sang this morning. This was talking about the Spirit of God, how it breaks the power of sin and darkness, the hope and righteousness of God, the light shining in the darkness, the hope of all the nations, and by the way, the hope of the United States is included in that. So we're very, very honored, if not privileged, to be in relationship with our speaker. I must say, from a personal note, in the 5 years or so that we've been relating with Liberty Institute and its leader, I've seen his dependence on God increase. I don't know of a surer sign of maturity and of a disciple of Christ. So if you would, join me in welcoming Kelly Shackelford.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, I think of my dependency on God is definitely increasing. I just realize more and more what a piece of work I am. How I really need the Lord more and more. I just, when you're younger, I guess you have a little higher view of yourself. But you start getting wiser as you get older. This is, I speak around the country and run around a lot, but I just want to make clear, I think I said this last year, there's no place I feel more loved than at Sojourn Church. I consider it a rest stop, a place where I lick my wounds, just a place where people love me. And so I just want to thank this church for allowing me to have interaction, because it really is a privilege for me. I always want to repeat my testimony while I'm here, because I think it's important to understand God's initiation of all this. Liberty Institute's mission is to protect and to restore religious freedom in our schools, for our churches, in the military, and throughout the public arena. And, I got in this because when I was in high school, as a senior in high school, I was thinking, what are you supposed to do in your life? And I knew my gifts were in analytical thinking and speaking, and I thought, well, I either need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, isn't that kind of a God or Satan choice? And, I went to my youth pastor, and he said, if you're called to be a minister, it's a wonderful calling, but I will say this. There are a lot of Christian pastors, but, boy, we sure could use some more Christian lawyers. And as I analyzed my DNA, I thought, I'm probably better with the justice thing than the mercy thing. I probably would make a better lawyer. I really knew God was calling me to law school, and I went to law school. And my grades from college and everything would have put me intelligence scores, average law student. But my heart was for ministry when I was in law school. So I donated a lot of my time at my church leading the discipleship ministry for the college students. Well, this is a really bad plan. Be an average intelligence, average student, and then study less than everybody else because you're working at the church. But when I got my grades back, I was making all the high grades. And it was just God's way to show me, I want you to do law, but I want you to keep that ministry approach. And so I got out, I clerked for a federal judge here in town, and you do that for a year. You understand what everything looks like on the other side of the bench, what's persuasive, what's not, how things work. So all the big law firms give you all these offers to come work for them. Well, I remember sitting in my little federal clerk's office and thinking, I think I would suffocate if I went and did one of these jobs. I just don't feel called to that. And I remember thinking, what do you want to do? God will give you the desires of your heart, if they're in line with Him. What do you want to do? And I thought, well, I want to do legal cases. I feel like the Lord showed me I should do that. but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedoms and our founding principles, and I'd love even to go to seminary part-time if I could. And I laughed because there's no paying job to do all that. And about 2 weeks later, 2 lawyers with big national law firms called me. I never met these guys, went to lunch. They said, we started donating our time for religious freedom. We're now getting so many calls, it's hurting our ability to make a living. We were wondering, would you be willing to come on, do legal cases, help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles? And you can even go to seminary part-time if you want to. Being young to mid-20s and evidently not quite mature enough in my faith, I said, let me pray about that. Like that wasn't an answer to prayer. And the next morning, I realized, that was an answer to prayer. And I said, yes. And they said, how much you need to live on. And basically, they started paying me out of their pocket to start this effort. And 25 years later, here we are. And Liberty Institute's the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on religious liberty in the United States. One of God's... It's not only one of those American stories, but it's really a God story. And God knew, almost everything I touched now case-wise are something that when I started, you could have never convinced me we would ever have to fight for, right? God knew this time was coming. And so, as I think, I'm giving you an update from the front lines. That's what I do every year. Here's an update from the front lines. Here's what's happening. But there's a theme to usually what God's doing or what I see him doing. Last year, it was a fun theme, which was, it was the Holy Spirit was just moving. And if you've had these times in your life where you saw that happen, if you're smart enough, what you learn is, I'm just walking in the midst of that, and I'm jumping on the caboose. I'm doing whatever I can because God is moving. And so it was incredible to see what was happening last year. My theme this year is different. As I really prayed about this, I really feel like, what the Lord wants me to pass on to you is that the truth that the battle is getting fiercer. And really, sort of, I feel like I'm sort of the Paul Revere, except not saying the British are coming, but I'm so supposed to say to you, Joshua 1, Joshua 1. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. That's repeated over and over again in Joshua 1 because the body needed to hear it. And so why do I say this? Well, we do a survey every year of all the attacks on religious freedom. And last year it doubled from the year before. This year it increased another 20% above that. This is it. There's like 4 or 5 a page. This is everything from, a 5-year-old who was stopped from praying over her meal in the school lunch cafeteria, to senior citizens who were told their meals were going to be taken away from them because they were praying over their meals and they were federally funded, and that violated separation of church and state. It's in the north, it's in the south, it's the young, the old, it's people with money, it's people without. It's in every, there is no way you can go and run and avoid this. It's in your community, all around you, whether you realize it or not. And, the bad thing about this is not only does this mean something very bad for religious freedom, but what a lot of times I'll go and I'll speak and people say, look, I'm not a religious person. Should I care about this religious freedom? And the answer is yes, because the founders called this our first freedom. They understood that if you lose this freedom, you will lose all your freedoms. And the reason is kind of simple. If totalitarianism is going to come in and take over, the one thing that totalitarianism can never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. So whenever you see that come in, you will see the flashpoint, the very first flashpoint will be religious freedom. Because they can't have citizens who bow a knee to somebody above the government. And this is therefore a sign. It's kind of like in the old days when we used to have a little red light on the dashboard of our car when the oil gets low that tells you when you see this, it means the whole engine's about to blow if you don't get this under control. So that's one of the reasons. One of the other reasons I would tell you the battle is fierce, I could do this almost every day. I'll just take something that happened in the last 2 days. How many have heard what's happening in Houston? Okay? I was just down there Thursday doing a press conference with Senator Cruz and myself where we blasted the mayor and the city for sending subpoenas to pastors demanding that they hand over their sermons and their private communications with their congregation. Now, when you see, if you just heard those facts, Where would you think that is? You would think we were describing Nazi Germany, which is very similar to what they did, the Muslim orders in Nazi Germany. This is in the United States of America. Not only that, it's not Massachusetts. This is Houston, Texas. Okay? So, and by the way, this is the second, and I'll read you, I brought it with me. I forgot to do this in the first service. This is part of the subpoena, demanding that they hand over, quote, all sermons related to homosexuality or any sermons that mention the mayor. Incredible. I mean, you feel like you're in a different country when you hear these things. Well, at least how's it going in the schools, you might say? What's the update there? Let me show you a little video, and I'm just going to talk about it real quickly. These are all things that have just happened since I was here last year, but let's watch this video.
I noticed that she has a book, a religious book in the classroom. He's not permitted to read those books in my classroom.
I was about to pray and say something to Jesus, and my lunch teacher told me that you're not allowed to pray.
I just simply said, bless you, and the teacher asked who said it. I told her that I did, and she asked why. I said I was just being courteous. She said, says who? I said my pastor, and my parents taught me that it was courtesy. After that, one of the classmates asked her what she had against the word bless you, and she said that there will be no godly speaking in the class.
The first and second times I submitted my speech last week, the school told me, as well as their attorneys, that any reference to God or Jesus or prayer of any kind was unconstitutional, and they would pull the mic on me.
That's when I said my pastor told me that a constitutional right, and it's my freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And then she sent me down to the office.
The third draft was denied. That was the afternoon of the graduation. Time was ticking down. I was at a crossroads and really wasn't sure of what to do.
So long as students are following the rules of the classroom, we expect our teachers and school officials to follow the rules of the Constitution.
But I decided to really stick with what I wanted to give the message, and that was to stand up for my freedom of expression and stand up for my faith.
No man or woman has ever truly succeeded or been fulfilled on the account of living for others and not standing on what they knew in their heart was right or good.
It's just a quick, just some of the cases we've had in the last year, and you saw the little 5-year-old girl who was literally told that she couldn't pray over her meal at school. She was stopped from praying. You got to credit the little girl and her parents because when she was told she couldn't pray in school, her answer was, "But I can pray in school." So she did know. She did know what was right, but I mean, it's just unbelievable that that's the kind of thing. You saw the teacher who threatened Giovanni Rubio. His favorite book he got for Christmas was a new Bible, and in free reading time, he was reading his Bible. That was the religious book that he can't have in her classroom. You've got the girl you saw that was literally thrown out of her class because somebody sneezed and she said, "Bless you." and you think, and just in case you think that was an accident, no, we have a picture from a phone, thank goodness, of the chalkboard in that class that lists the words that they're not allowed to say. Dumb, stupid, and God bless you are right up there with the, I mean, it was specifically being banned from saying bless you. You know, I think of the thing we just had over the last week or so. We have a young man from Long Island, New York. He was a junior last year, but they had all these clubs in his school. They had a gay straight alliance and all these other things, and he just wanted there to be a Christian club where Christians could get together. And he was stopped for you know, almost a year, told no, we're not going to allow your club. And he didn't give up. He finally got a hold of us, and we were able to send a letter, and it took 6 or 7 hours for them to realize that, you know, they're violating federal law and they better change their ways quickly. And they did. And so he got his club right at the end of the school year. Okay? But they denied him again this year. Okay? After knowing what the law was last year, they denied him again. Unbelievable. So this is the kind of thing these kids, and think about that. You're a high school student. All the adults, the people who are supposed to do right are opposing you. I mean, that's got to be scary, right? But John's standing his ground. But this is what kids are having to go through. And what about not just the schools? What about in the public arena? How are things going? Very dangerous things happening there. And it's particularly in the workplace. We're seeing a real move there that really there's an attempt to just say, that's where most of us spend most of our waking hours. If they can get rid of religious freedom there, then that's a huge coup. Well, so I think everybody knows about Hobby Lobby, right? The Hobby Lobby case that went to the Supreme Court. Obamacare's HHS mandate that wants to force Christian businesses and Christian ministries too, by the way, to provide abortion-causing drugs to their employees. And Hobby Lobby said, we're not going to do it. Very few people, though, know what the government argued in the Supreme Court. I mean, I was in the front of the Supreme Court when the argument occurred. The Solicitor General of the United States, the highest lawyer in the country for our federal government, stood up in front of those justices, and this is not an exaggeration, this is what he argued. Once you make a decision to go into a for-profit business, you are making the decision to waive your religious freedoms. And, quote, you now play by the government's rules. That's what he said. Now, you say, well, but he lost. True. You know, Hobby Lobby was a victory at the Supreme Court. We won 5-4. Okay? This is an argument that never would have been dared to even be made 10 years ago. And now it's got 4 votes on the court. So you see the hostility coming. But it's not just Christian employers that this happened to. We're now getting this huge avalanche of cases with Christian employees who are being fired, not because of anything they do at work, but because somebody finds out that they're a Christian and that they go to such and such church and that they believe in the Bible. Example, we filed just 2 weeks ago a case on behalf of a guy by the name of Eric Walsh. Eric is a wonderful guy, African-American, PhD, MD, Director of Public Health for the city of Pasadena. State of Georgia says, we want you to be our Director of Public Health. He accepts. Then the next thing he knows, he is being told that he is now being fired and they're withdrawing his job offer because they found out that he actually goes to church on Sunday and that at church sometimes he's allowed to preach and that he's preached before on things like homosexual conduct being wrong and therefore they don't want him to come work for him anymore. And then the city of Pasadena fired him from his job as Director of Public Health. So here's a guy who literally right now cannot get a job anywhere in the country as Director of Public Health because of what he believes and what he said in his pulpit at his church. Has nothing to do with his job. And we're seeing a lot of these. I just had a visit from the head barrister in the UK who does what I do. And he said, you know, we saw this about 7 years ago. And he said, we were kind of slow to respond. And he said, and what happened is when we lost, we didn't just lose the case with their job. But what happens is it then becomes that every profession, because everybody has to get licensed somewhere, right? Every profession began to say those kind of beliefs are a danger to the profession. Whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a doctor, whether, you know, they're mutually exclusive. And he said, now once that happened, Christians had to decide whether they were going to be open about their faith and risk probably losing their career or just be silent. And he said about 70% decided that they would just be silent. He said, and that's when we lost our country. He said, so you better get on this, better get on it quickly, and you better win. And you better make them feel the loss so that no one will ever think that this is something you can do in the United States of America. And so that's the battle we're in right now, just in the public arena about, and again, I could run through a lot of other cases that are examples of this. We just had an editor-in-chief of a newspaper who was fired from editor-in-chief. Why? Because he had a personal blog and he mentioned his faith on his personal blog. This is the kind of thing that's happening. Now, the military, I think this is a great one to use to show you how quickly things are moving. And a lot of you remember that our Mojave Desert Cross case. This is back in 1934, these World War I vets came back. They were tired, and they needed to heal because the Spanish flu was a big problem in World War I. And they went to the desert, in the middle of the desert, to prospect. And they decided they wanted to put something up to remember those who'd given their lives for their country, their buddies. So they put up a 7-foot cross. And by the way, these weren't very religious guys. They put up a cross because that's what you put up to remember people who'd given their lives. And at the bottom of the cross, it said, "For the dead of all wars." VFW posts and had their number. Sat there for 70 years until the ACLU filed a lawsuit and said, you have to tear this down because this is a cross and we don't allow crosses on government property. And the next thing you knew, both the district court and court of appeals said, tear it down. And we jumped in at that point when it was going to the Supreme Court on behalf of all the major veterans groups and said, oh no, don't you dare tear this down. But I want to remind you, I've shown you this picture before, I want to show you a picture of what they did while it was on appeal, what the judge ordered be done while it was on appeal to the Supreme Court. You can see that that memorial, that cross, is covered in a bag with a chain around the bottom and a padlock. And you look at that and you think, what country is that in, right? To me, that's the perfect visual for what the other side is trying to accomplish. It's the physical representation of what they want to do. Now, we ended up going to the Supreme Court. That was reversed. We won. ACLU lost. That cross is back up, and the bag is off. But, point out, we won 5-4. So you change one vote, the bag is the law. Okay? And you think, well, at least it's over. No, it's not over. We've got 5 more of these around the country right now where they're trying to tear down veterans memorials. And the Mount Soledad is probably the most well-known. It's a beautiful memorial. It's been up since 1954, and it just remembers those who have made sacrifice for their country. There are 3,500 plaques around it that have each of the soldiers and just different people who've given sacrifice. And the last order in that court was tear down that memorial within 90 days. I want to show you real quickly a video that we have on that. mean, if they win one of these, just think of all the religious symbols. I mean, Arlington Memorial you saw there, but I mean, pretty much in every community of every state of this country, that religious cleansing is what they're looking for. They need a precedent, and Mount Soledad is getting them very close. But we're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to get that overturned. And very important case. But the problem is this isn't just happening in the military to symbols. It's happening internally as well. I know I talked about Sergeant Monk in that case last year, 19 and a half years in the Air Force. This guy's a hero. What he did in Iraq, came back to the United States only to be ordered by his lesbian commander that he agree with her on gay marriage. And when he wouldn't do that, she relieved him of his duties after 19 and a half years. This is the kind of thing that's going on. I spoke at the Air Force Academy and the Naval Academy last year, and at both places, the midshipmen and the cadets came up to me afterwards, one by one, not knowing what they were doing, and saying to me, Mr. Shackelford, I'm a Christian, and in light of what I'm seeing here, should I get out of here? That is not the military we used to have. It used to be that Judeo-Christian values were very consistent with what goes on in the military, with honor and integrity and courage. Now, those things are under assault. Now, the good news is we're starting to turn those things around, and I'll tell you a little story later of one example of that. But the point is, it is getting fiercer, the attacks. There's no doubt. The good news is that we actually have a way of dealing with this, and it's not just a theory, it's working. And that is, all the nonprofit legal groups that are out there do the same thing. Raise as much money as they can raise, hire as many attorneys with that money as they can, and then put them in an office in D.C. or New York and ship them around to do the cases. That's not our model. Our model I would call a body of Christ model. And it is, there are all these people who went to law school because they wanted to be the hero. They wanted to stand for righteousness. They wanted to ride in on the white horse and save the day. And 30 years later, these are the best litigators at some of the best law firms in the world. And they've done honorable work for people who've paid them, but they've never gotten a chance to do a case for the kingdom. So we go and we find them and we say, look, as one of the best, if we give you everything you need, are you willing to give your time for one of these cases for the kingdom? And they're like, I've been waiting for 35 years, sign me up. We know it's going to happen for the first time in their life. All their talent, all their gifts, all their training is lined up with their faith. They've never felt that before. And so it's kind of unfair, but we know we now have them for the rest of their life as a volunteer attorney because they've got to do another one of these. And they give cover to all the younger attorneys that are underneath them. They get to taste of what this is like, and then they're hooked for life. So we've now been doing this long enough where of the top 50 law firms in the country, over half don't just give their time. They fight each other over who gets to give their time on these cases. The result of that is phenomenal. Number one, for every case we do, for every $10,000 we spend, we get $60,000 donated in time by the attorneys. Number two, if you look at all of the nonprofit law firms, you'll see that they'll win a case, they'll lose a case. They'll win a case, they'll lose a case. Maybe 50-50. Maybe if they're really good, 60-40. Our win rate now for 12 years straight has been above 99%. Okay? And that's because this is God's method. These are the best of the best of the best. And although it's very meaningful to them, how neat is that the body of Christ provides these people who are in need, whether it's the little 5-year-old girl who's told she can't pray or you name the case, and then one of the best of the best of the best from the body of Christ is going to be her attorney. And that's why. So every time we go into court, we have the best of the best of the best on our side and some government lawyer or nonprofit lawyer on the other side. And so the talent is incredible that we have on our side. Now, the thing about that is, and we talked about this last year, it's one of the things about Sojourn has been with me on this journey. About 3 years ago, you know what happens when you win 99% of your cases. Everybody says, I want you doing my case. And we started getting pulled all over the country. We were just a Texas group. And so we really committed to prayer and realized God was calling us to go national because he knew what was coming. And we needed to grow, and we needed to grow quickly. And so we laid out a very extensive plan that we really feel like was God's plan. But, we were a $3 million group, and the ACLU is $120 million. So although we beat them every time, we couldn't be everywhere they were. So our plan was we're going from $3 million, next year $5 million, next year $7 million, next year $9 million. Now, that is tripling in 3 years. That is not my normal approach. I'm a conservative type person. Oh, yeah, we're going to triple in 3 years. But that's what God did. And so last year I came to you and I said, how did it go the first year? We went from $3 million to $5 million and 50,000 at the end of the first year. And then I told you last year, I said, but I don't even know how we went from 3 to 5. So I certainly don't know how we're going from 5 to 7. I have no idea where the extra $2 million is coming from. In fact, I said, if any of you have a check and want to leave a $2 million check on the way out, I'd appreciate it. And I said, but at least pray for us. 2 weeks later, I walked into somebody held an event at their home to introduce people to Liberty. There were about 40 some odd people there. And 2 people left a card, and it said, I'm giving $1 million, and my husband's giving $1 million, $2 million. Okay? So maybe you prayed really, really hard, and it really worked. So I'm asking you again, because now I'm not getting that $2 million this year, so I certainly have no idea how we're going to $9 million this year. But you know what? This was God's plan. It's going to happen. He knows there's a need, and He's asked us to do this, and so I'm just watching to see what's going to happen. But it's been incredible to watch the journey as God has been building us up so that we can help others. Now, some people say, yeah, you're winning these cases, but, can we turn this thing around? And the answer is yes. We tend to think it takes majorities. I don't know why we do that. That's never how anything really gets done. In the Bible, it's usually just one person, right? But I think often more common, it's everybody in the community looks around and wonders, is anybody going to stand up? And when one person does, or one small group does, everybody stands with them. It takes a committed group. It takes what I said earlier. It takes Joshua 1. Be strong and courageous. And if you do, everything changes. Take that little boy I mentioned to you earlier, little boy, he's in high school. John, told 2 years in a row, no Bible club. Okay? He stood his ground against all these adults and everybody else. And just about a week ago, we had to send another letter saying, we're going to have to sue you. And they backed down again, and they said, you can have your club, this time at the beginning of the year. But you know what? Because of all the controversy, because of what happened, his club is huge, way beyond whatever he wanted in the beginning. He could have said, God, why are you causing me all this trouble? He was just faithful. God had a plan, okay? And just like I told you, I talked at the Air Force Academy. Right after that, about 2 weeks, there was a big news story that they all have a little whiteboard on the back of their door. And they put whatever they want on those things. And one of the cadets had put Galatians 2:20. Well, the Air Force Academy ordered him to take it down off his own door. Well, we got our attorneys ready. They were on a plane in no time on their way to Colorado Springs. But before we could even get there, one night had passed, before it made the news. And remember, they had all been in our session where we talked about what their rights were and their religious freedoms were. And the next morning, on their own, there was a picture in the newspaper, in fact, down the hall, all the whiteboards of every person had scripture verses all up and down the whole place. Not powerful people, these cadets, but they knew the freedoms they have, and they weren't going to be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. And so they were willing to be, strong and courageous. So some of you will ask, you'll say, look, okay, I understand we're in a fierce battle, so what are you asking me to do? Well, number one, I would say, are you ready? And I don't just mean you, but have you talked to your kids? Have you talked to your grandkids? We need to understand there's a shift, that it used to be people my age and older, you didn't really have to worry about paying a price in this country for being a follower of Christ. But I think now it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And so you want to make that decision now, before it happens, so that I'm willing to pay the price, and your kids and your grandkids, so that when that happens, you don't make a mistake. Because look, the Israelites didn't reach the promised land until they went through Joshua 1, okay? I mean, God had to tell them. Remember they thought the giants and everybody that they're going to have to fight, they were going to have a lot of things in their way. But you know what? God just kept reminding them, be strong and courageous. I'm with you. Be strong and courageous. And, I bet most of you, do you feel something happen in this country? Can't you feel what's coming? And the requirement is, it's an opportunity, it's a privilege that we get to represent Christ when so much is at play right now, but we really are going to have to be intentional about it. We're going to have to stand and not turn and let things happen. We're respectful and Christ-like in the way we stand, but standing is not an option, not for Christians. Secondly, what you can do is you can pray. And I really covet your prayers for Liberty Institute. I am convinced that for the last 6 months, our organization and our staff has been under a spiritual attack. I've never seen the kind of sickness, the kind of engines blowing up and burning. I mean, the things that are happening are so obvious. We need prayer cover, you know. So I've been sick for 6 months straight. I think the Lord is starting to heal me. I'm getting a little better, but you know, it's incredible what our staff has been going through, and so I would really covet your prayers. In fact, anybody here who is willing to pray for Liberty over the next year, will you raise your hand? Because I want to tell my staff thank you. Keep us in prayer because we really need, I mean, my goal somewhat is, you know, there's a lot of things happening in the country, but it only takes one person to start a revival. And so if we could be privileged enough to be the ones that opened that space where that one person or that one group stepped in and started the revival that changed the entire country, that'd be a life worth living. And so the enemy doesn't want us to do that. They don't want guys like John, who's a high school student, who now has a huge number of people coming to his Christian club. They don't want those things to happen. So we really do need prayer, and I covet that prayer. And I'll tell you, I've experienced this a lot over the past year. I'll do this real quickly. I had the honor this last year of speaking at Charles Stanley's church, of doing his Sunday services. And I felt horrible. Just, I can't tell you how bad I felt at that time. And I walked in, and I could even remember as I was speaking, talking to myself and saying, boy, I hope this is okay because you feel so bad, you know. And I felt like at the end that I really didn't have any energy. I didn't have much I could say. I just felt like, I don't know how this is going to work. The immediate response was electric. Charles Stanley got up at the end, and he turned to his congregation, and he said, you know, I don't tell you to do anything that I don't do. He said, and I want you to know I am going to personally support this organization, and I challenge every one of you to prayerfully consider doing so as well. And he put this on TV on 100 stations where his show carries. We had a response the likes of which we have never seen all over the country. And it was just God's way to make sure we knew, make sure I knew, he doesn't really need 100% of me, okay? I mean, he doesn't even need 1% of me. But he wants us to be faithful. So I just tell you that because if you're through a time of suffering right now and you wonder if you can have any impact, you can have great impact. It's just obedience. No matter how you feel, just obedience. And so we really do covet your prayers. And then last, I just say, you know, you can let us help you. If you see one of these situations, call us. If you see a neighbor or a friend or any way you see any of these things happening, whether it's a child at school or anything else, let us know. We'd love to help. That's exactly why we're here. And you can be our ambassadors. You can take things like off our website, like what are the rights of kids at school? And you can spread that all through the internet so that all kinds of kids know that they can share the gospel, that they can form a Christian club, that they can do all the different things that they can do to make a difference for Christ. So I would encourage you to do that. But I want to thank you. I love this church. It's such a privilege for me to be here. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for many people here are involved in the ministry and are praying for us. And I get encouragement from Hugh all the time. You'll send me an email or something. And I just love this church and really appreciate y'all. And just thank you so much. God bless you.